The request came with no explanation. Darren Cole had been eating a cold sandwich at his desk when Director Stahl walked in, placed a single data chip in front of him, and said 3 words, "We need you." The chip contained one file, a name, listed only as Valeth Ward, female, juvenile, a medical notation that said, nonverbal, cause undetermined, and a room number. That was it. Darren had spent 11 years as a xenocommunication specialist aboard Halcyon Drift. He had worked with a Garathi soldier whose language involved clicking bones. He had helped a human child born deaf find a way to speak to her alien crewmates. He had sat with a dying Pelhari elder and learned enough of her dying dialect to let her say goodbye to her family. He was good at his job because he was patient. He was patient because he genuinely believed that every mind, no matter how closed it looked from the outside, had something it wanted to say. He picked up the chip and went to the room. She was sitting in the far corner when he arrived. Not on the bed, on the floor, back against the wall, legs folded neatly beneath her. She was small for a Valeth. They were usually tall and angular, their skin carrying that faint silver-blue sheen that caught light like polished stone. She had it too, but softer somehow. Her eyes were the strangest part. Pale silver, with a faint inner glow. Bioluminescent, like deep-sea creatures Darren had seen in nature archives. They were fixed on the floor when he walked in. He said hello in standard. Nothing. He tried the primary Valeth dialect, formal register, the kind used in official settings, then the informal register, then a coastal sub-dialect he had picked up from a trading crew 3 years ago. She did not move, did not look up. The room stayed completely silent except for the low hum of the station's air system. Darren pulled a chair over and sat down at a comfortable distance, not too close. He did not lean forward or try to make eye contact. He just sat. After a while he said, still in standard, "You don't have to do anything. I'm just going to sit here for a bit." A man was watching from the doorway. Valeth, tall, dressed in the plain gray of a low-ranking diplomatic attaché. He had been there since Darren arrived, standing with his arms behind his back, saying nothing. When Darren glanced at him, the man gave a small nod that communicated absolutely nothing useful. Darren looked back at the girl. He tried a translation tablet, held it up, activated the display, cycled through symbol sets. She did not react. He tried placing a writing stylus on the floor between them. She did not reach for it. He opened his hands, palms up, a gesture of openness that worked across most species with bilateral symmetry. Still nothing. Then he knocked his elbow against the small table beside him, and his water cup hit the floor. The sound was sharp. The cup bounced once and rolled. Her eyes came up, not in alarm, not in fear. Her head lifted with precise, controlled movement, and her eyes locked onto the rolling cup with the kind of focused attention that a person gives something genuinely interesting. Her bioluminescent irises flickered, just for a second, a pulse of brighter light that faded almost immediately. Darren picked up the cup. He set it back on the table. She watched him do it. Then she looked back at the floor. He stayed another 30 minutes. She did not speak. She did not write. She did not gesture. But twice more. When he moved or made a small sound, those silver eyes came up and found him with that same precise attention. The flicker happened again when he accidentally tore the corner off a page in his notebook. When he left, the Valeth attaché followed him into the corridor. "Well?" the man said. "She's not mute," Darren said, "and she's not unaware. She's listening to everything. She does not speak." "I know." Darren looked back at the closed door. "What happened to her?" The attaché's expression did not change. "She simply does not speak. That is all you need to know." "That's not all I need to know to help her." "Find a way," the man said, and walked away. Darren stood in the corridor for a moment. Then he went back to his office, pulled up everything he had on Valeth emotional suppression, developmental psychology, and selective mutism across 7 species, and started reading. He was still reading when the station lights shifted to their night cycle. He had filled 4 pages of notes. None of it felt like enough. But there was one thing he was already certain of. written at the top of the first page and circled twice. This is not a language problem. Whatever had gone quiet inside that girl, it was not her voice. He closed the files, looked at the ceiling for a moment, and thought about the way her eyes had come up when the cup fell. Not frightened, focused, like someone who still noticed things, still cared about the shape of the world around her, even if she had decided, or been forced, to go somewhere unreachable inside herself. He thought about that for a long time. Then he made a decision that had nothing to do with method or protocol or 11 years of professional training. He was going to keep showing up, every day, without pressure, without a goal she could feel hanging over the room like a weight. He was just going to be there. Because the one thing he had learned in 11 years was this: nobody stays silent forever when they feel genuinely safe. He just had to build that part first. Nobody on Halcyon Drift understood what Darren was doing. Lati Rendaus, the station's head of security, said as much on the third day. He cornered Darren near the food hall and crossed his arms and said, "You're just sitting in there, for hours, doing nothing." "I'm reading," Darren said, "with an alien who won't acknowledge you." "She acknowledges me. She just doesn't say anything about it." Ren stared at him like he had said something wrong in a language Ren was only partially fluent in. Then he walked away. Darren went back to the room. He had stopped bringing communication tools. No tablets, no symbol charts, no stylus sets arranged like an invitation. He brought a book, a real one, paper pages, and a second chair, which he placed at the table and left empty. He did not ask her to sit in it. He put a small mechanical puzzle on the table too, the kind with interlocking metal rings that separated into 6 pieces and could be rebuilt 3 different ways. He sat down, opened his book, and read. She was in her corner. She always started in her corner. He noticed she moved, slightly, incrementally, over the course of each session. Never toward him directly, but the distance between them shrank by a few centimeters every day, the way a tide comes in so slowly you miss it happening. On the 4th day, he stepped out for 10 minutes to get tea. When he came back, the puzzle was disassembled on the table and reassembled, but not in any of the 3 standard configurations. The rings were arranged in a 4th way he had never seen, technically different, structurally sound, and if he was being honest, more elegant than the original design. He set his tea down, looked at the puzzle, looked at her. She was back in her corner, eyes on the floor, completely still. He sat down and put a second puzzle on the table, harder, more pieces. He opened his book again. The next morning, that one was solved too. He started leaving a new puzzle every day. She solved every single one. Twice she improved on the design. He began to understand something important. This was not a mind in retreat. This was a mind that was fully operational, deeply observant, and choosing, very deliberately now, to control every signal it gave off. He also started to understand the eyes. The bioluminescent flicker was not random. He had been watching it for days now, keeping a small notebook of when it happened and what was occurring at the time. The pattern was emerging. A slow pulse meant something like calm attention. A sharp single flash meant something had surprised or interested her. A rapid cycling, which he had only seen once, when the station's external alarm had tested briefly, seemed to mean distress. He wrote it all down. He did not tell her he was doing it. On the 7th day, he left the notebook on the table and went to stand at the window, looking out at the stars. He heard nothing behind him, no movement, no sound. But when he turned around 20 minutes later, the notebook was back where he had left it, and on the page with his flicker chart, 3 of his interpretations had been crossed out in clean, precise lines. Beside each one, written in neat trade script, the neutral written language used across species for basic commerce and diplomacy, were single replacement words. He looked at the corrections for a long time. Then he picked up his pen and wrote below the last one, "Thank you. Were there any I got right?" He set the notebook down and went back to his window. The next morning, 2 of his interpretations were circled. That night, Darren sat in his office and felt something he could not quite name. It was not excitement, though there was something of that in it. It was closer to the feeling of watching a fire catch, that moment between the spark and the flame when you hold your breath because you know something real is beginning. Director Stahl called him at 9. She sounded strained. Wren tells me the Valeth attaché has been sending encrypted transmissions off station every 48 hours. Increased frequency in the last 2 days. Do you have any idea what that means? It means someone is very interested in how this is going, Darren said. Should I be worried? He thought about the crossed-out words in his notebook, the circled interpretations, the fourth configuration of interlocking rings that no one had designed. Not yet, he said. He went back to the room the next afternoon with the notebook, a harder puzzle and something new, a glass prism. Simple. The kind sold in trinket shops near the science exhibit on Deck 4. He set it on the table and said nothing about it. He was halfway through his book when the light shifted. He looked up. She had moved from her corner, not much, 3 steps maybe, and was standing at the edge of the table. She had picked up the prism and was holding it toward the overhead light. The room filled with scattered color. Pale bands of red and gold and blue spread across the walls like something alive. Her bioluminescent eyes pulsed slowly. The pattern he now knew meant calm attention. But there was something else in it. Something he had not recorded before. A warmth to the light. A softness. He looked back at his book. He did not smile. He did not say anything. He let her have the moment without turning it into a milestone. But in the notebook, very quietly, he wrote 4 words. She is still there. She did not speak. But she began to answer. Darren built a proper chart from his notebook observations, 12 bioluminescent patterns he had recorded, each one mapped to an emotional state. He printed it clean, labeled every entry carefully, and set it on the table the next morning with nothing else. No book, no puzzle, just the chart and a pen. He sat by the window and watched the stars. When he came back the next day, the chart had been transformed. More than half his labels were crossed out and replaced. The corrections were written in the same neat trade script, precise, unhurried, like the handwriting of someone who had been taught to write by a very serious instructor. A few of his entries had small notes beside them. One said, "Close, but this one means anticipation, not curiosity. They are different." Another said simply, "Wrong." He read every correction carefully. Then he wrote at the bottom of the page, "How many did I get right?" Left it on the table. Came back the next morning. 4 were circled. That was how it started. The notes grew longer over the following days. He would leave a question. She would answer it. He would make an observation. She would correct it or confirm it. The exchanges were short at first. A sentence from him, a sentence back. But they lengthened. She began to include things he had not asked for. Details, descriptions. On the 9th day of the notebook exchange, she described the Valeth homeworld's primary ocean in 4 sentences that were so precise and so visually exact that Darren read them 3 times. He wrote back, "You write like someone who pays very close attention to everything." She wrote back, "I was trained to." He did not push on that. He filed it away. The attaché, Surath, Darren had learned his name by now, intercepted one of the notes. Not physically, but Darren noticed the slight displacement of the paper one morning. The edge caught at a different angle than he had left it. Someone had read it. That afternoon, Surath appeared in the corridor outside and fell into step beside Darren. "You should be careful," Surath said, "about forming an attachment." "I'm doing my job," Darren said. "Your job is communication rehabilitation, not friendship." Darren stopped walking and looked at him. "Those aren't always separate things." Surath's expression was flat. "You do not know the weight of what you are carrying, Mr. Cole." "Then, explain it to me." A pause, long enough to be deliberate. Then, "When the time comes, it will be explained." He walked away. Darren stood in the corridor and decided he did not like Surath very much. That evening, Wren stopped by his office again. The security officer had a look on his face that sat somewhere between suspicion and genuine unease. Valith transmission frequency doubled again, he said. Whoever they're reporting to, they're very interested in something, or very worried about it. Maybe both, Darren said. Wren left without a satisfying answer, which seemed to be his recurring experience with Darren these days. The notes continued. She asked him one evening, left on the table when he arrived, why he had not stopped trying after the first week when she gave him nothing. He wrote back, "Because you clearly had things to say. You just weren't ready to say them to someone you didn't trust yet." The next note, "How did you know I wasn't simply unable to communicate?" He wrote, "The puzzles. You didn't solve them the way the instructions said. You found better ways. Someone who can't communicate doesn't look for better ways. They just stop." A long pause in the exchange after that. 2 days with no note. He did not push. He kept coming, kept sitting, kept leaving the page open and the pen on the table. On the third day, a new note appeared, longer than anything she had written before. It described, in careful and exact language, the way the station's artificial lighting shifted in the early morning cycle, the specific quality of the pale gold that crept along the floor before the overhead lights fully activated. She wrote that it reminded her of something she could not name, a feeling without a word attached to it. Darren read it twice. Then he picked up the pen and wrote back. In some human languages, there is a word for the feeling of light after a long darkness. Different cultures named it differently, but they were all trying to catch the same thing, that specific feeling when something heavy lifts and the world looks clean again. In one old Earth language it was called hope, but that word got used so much it wore thin. The feeling it was pointing at is still real, though. I think you might be describing that. He left it on the table and went to his window. He heard something behind him. Not a word, not quite, but a sound. The smallest exhale of breath, controlled almost perfectly. The kind of sound that escapes when something lands exactly right inside a person, and they cannot quite contain all of it. He did not turn around. He looked at the stars and let her have it privately. Because that was the thing about real communication. It was never just about the words going out. It was about having enough space to feel what the words meant when they arrived. He was beginning to think she had not had that space in a very long time. There was a place on Halcyon Drift called the Outer Observation Deck, a narrow corridor of reinforced glass on the station's quietest side, facing away from the shipping lanes. Most staff ignored it. The view was just open space. No planets, no traffic, just stars sitting still in the dark. Darren went there sometimes when he needed to think. He found Sova there one evening by accident. She was standing at the far end, hands at her sides, face turned toward the glass. The stars reflected faintly in her silver eyes. She did not hear him come in, or if she did, she gave no signal. He almost left. Then he decided not to and walked to the other end of the corridor and leaned against the rail and looked at the same stars from a different angle. They stood like that for a while, not together exactly, just two people in the same quiet place. After several minutes, she spoke. One word. Quiet. In standard human English, which she had clearly been listening to and absorbing for weeks without indicating it. Loud, she said. He looked over at her. The station? She shook her head. She raised one hand and pressed 2 fingers to her chest, over her sternum. Her bioluminescent eyes pulsed with the slow, heavy pattern he now knew meant grief. He understood. He looked back at the stars. The inside kind of loud, he said. The kind that fills up all the space until you can't hear anything else. She did not answer, but she did not move away either. He thought for a moment about whether to say the next thing. Then he said it, because he thought she had earned the honesty. I stopped talking once. Not like you. I still had the physical ability. But there was a period of about 4 months where I went through all the motions and said words when words were required, and I was completely unreachable the whole time. Nobody noticed, which was its own kind of information. He paused. It wasn't until someone sat with me without needing me to be okay that anything shifted. A long silence. Then she said, still quiet, still in English, "What was making it loud?" He told her, not everything, but enough. A mission that had gone wrong years back. A man he had been trying to help who did not survive. The way Darren had replayed every decision for months, every word he had chosen, every moment where a different choice might have changed the outcome. She listened with the kind of absolute attention she gave everything, fully present, nothing missed. When he finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I gave an order." He waited. "On my shuttle. There was a border engagement. I gave the order to hold position." A pause. Her voice was controlled, but it was costing her something to keep it that way. 3 of my crew were killed. The pilot, the navigation officer, a young Valith soldier on her first assignment. She stopped. "You have been carrying that," Darren said. It was not a question. "For 8 months," she said. He thought carefully about the next thing he said, because he had learned that this kind of moment required precision, not comfort, not reassurance, something more honest than that. "The order you gave, was it the wrong tactical decision? Or did something unpredictable happen after it?" A pause. "Unpredictable. Then the grief is real and it belongs to you," he said. "But the blame isn't the same thing as the grief. They feel identical from the inside, but they're not." Her eyes flickered. The pattern he did not have a full word for yet. Not grief alone and not relief alone, but something layered between them. She did not respond immediately. They stood in silence for another few minutes, then footsteps in the corridor. Fast ones. Surath appeared at the entrance to the observation deck with an expression he had never shown before. Something close to alarm, carefully controlled. "Sova." He said her name with weight. She straightened immediately, the controlled stillness snapping back into place like a shield. He looked at Darren. "Mr. Cole, your time here is concluded." "We were talking," Darren said. "Yes," Surath said. "I am aware." He said it like that fact was the problem. He stepped aside and gestured for Sova to leave. She went without looking back, but in the doorway she paused for just a moment, less than a second, and her bioluminescent eyes found Darren's face, the warmth pattern, the one he still did not have a full word for. Then she was gone. Surath lingered. "I want to be clear with you, Mr. Cole. There are parties monitoring this situation who are not on this station. What happens here has consequences far beyond what you understand." "Then help me understand it," Darren said. Surath left. That night, a folded note appeared under Darren's office door. He opened it. "I am not allowed to tell you who I am, but I want you to know. What you are doing matters. It matters more than you know. You asked for nothing from me. You expected nothing. I have not had that before. Not once. Not from anyone." He read it 3 times. Then he sat at his desk for a long time and looked at the ceiling and thought about a Valith girl standing in starlight, pressing 2 fingers to her chest and saying one word, loud. He understood her perfectly. The ships arrived without warning. Darren was in his office when the station's proximity alert hummed to life. Not the emergency klaxon, but the low, measured tone that meant something large had dropped out of faster-than-light travel close to the station's perimeter. He pulled up the external feed on his desk screen. 3 vessels. Enormous ones. Valith design. He recognized the swept geometry, the dark hulls with bioluminescent running lines that pulsed like veins. Military configuration. Their identification codes were scrolling at the bottom of the feed, and Darren did not recognize the classification string. But the duty officer on the bridge clearly did, because within 4 minutes, Director Stahl's voice came over the internal comm requesting all senior staff to the main briefing room immediately. Darren went. Stahl stood at the head of the table looking like a woman who had just received news she did not know what to do with. Ren was beside her with his arms crossed, which was his default posture when he was worried and trying not to show it. 3 Valeth Grand Fleet warships, Stahl said once the room was full. Command grade identification. They're not hostile. They've already requested docking clearance for a single shuttle. No weapons hot. But their fleet classification is... She paused. These aren't patrol ships. Wren said, they belong to the First Fleet. Admiral Orath Vel's personal command. The name landed in the room with weight. Darren knew it. Everyone in 3 sectors knew it. Vel had commanded the Valeth Grand Fleet for 30 years. The name was spoken with the particular careful respect that people reserved for forces of nature. Stahl looked at Darren directly. There's something I should have told you sooner. When Wren flagged the transmission activity, I ran a background check on the visitor manifest. Our ward, the girl in Module 7. She set a data chip on the table. Her name is Sova Vel, first daughter of Admiral Orath Vel. She is, by Valeth succession law, heir to the Fleet Command lineage. There is a formal rite of succession she must complete within the next 30 days. It requires her to speak publicly before the Valeth High Council. A pause. If she cannot, or will not, she is formally stripped of her title and removed from the lineage. The room was quiet. Darren heard all of it. He sat with it for a moment. Then he stood up and walked out. He heard Stahl say his name behind him. He kept walking. She was in her room, standing, not in her corner, not at the table, standing in the center of the space with her arms at her sides, which was not a posture he had seen from her before. Her bioluminescent eyes were cycling through patterns faster than usual, the rapid shift he associated with distress, but layered, not pure alarm. Something more complex. She knew the ships were there. Of course she did. He stepped inside. He left the door open behind him. I know who you are, he said. She looked at him. Her eyes slowed slightly. I want to ask you one question, he said. Not about the council, not about succession. One question for you. He waited until she gave the small, controlled nod that was her version of go-ahead. Do you want to speak? Not for the fleet, not for your father, not for the right, for yourself. Do you want your voice back? She held very still. Then she said quietly, I don't know if I remember how. He shook his head slowly. You've been speaking for weeks, the notes, the corrections, the observation deck. You said the word loud, and it was the exact right word. You told me about the ocean on your homeworld in 4 sentences that I still think about. You described light. He kept his voice even, unhurried. That's not someone who forgot how. That's someone who was afraid to, and did it anyway. Her eyes pulsed. The layered pattern. Grief and something fighting through it. What if I speak before the council and nothing comes, she said. Then nothing comes and we figure out the next step, he said. But I don't think that's what happens. I think what you're actually afraid of is that something does come, and it still won't be enough for all the people waiting for it. A long silence. Surath appeared in the doorway. The Admiral's shuttle has docked, he said. His voice was carefully neutral, which meant he had been listening. Mr. Cole, your work here is concluded. Thank you for your service. Darren looked at Sova. Her bioluminescent eyes found his, the warm, layered pulse he still did not have a word for. Thank you, she said, out loud, clear and direct, in standard. He nodded once and stepped out. Wren was in the corridor, leaning against the far wall. The security officer said nothing. He just looked at Darren for a moment, then gave a single small nod, the kind that meant I was wrong about this, and I know it. Darren walked 3 steps down the corridor, and then through the closed door behind him, he heard her voice. Not to him, not in standard, in Valeth, her language, full and formal, the voice of someone who had been trained to project command and was choosing, deliberately, to use that training. He could not hear the words. He did not need to. She was speaking. After 8 months of silence, she was speaking. He stood in the corridor and closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Then he walked on. Darren was in the food hall the next morning, staring at a cup of tea that had gone cold, when the summons arrived. Not a request, not an invitation, a summons, delivered by two Valeth soldiers in full dress uniform who appeared in the doorway, located him with the practiced efficiency of people who had already decided where to look, and informed him that Admiral Orath Vel wished to see him in the station's formal reception chamber. The reception chamber was a large room near the main docking hub that Darren had been in exactly twice in 11 years, both times for diplomatic events he had been dragged to by Stahl. It had high ceilings and good lighting, and the kind of deliberate emptiness that powerful people use to make rooms feel larger than they were. Admiral Vel was already there. He was everything the reputation suggested. Enormously tall, the ceiling only gave him a meter of clearance. His skin carried the deep silver blue of old Valeth blood, and his bioluminescent eyes were not Sova's pale silver, but a deep, settled gold. He occupied space the way mountains did. He looked at Darren for a long moment, said nothing. Darren waited. 7 specialists, Vel said finally. His standard was perfect. A man commanding fleets across 3 sectors would not leave communication to translators. Over 8 months, a xenopsychologist with 40 years of Valeth trauma work, a neural therapist, 3 linguists, a behavioral specialist, a counselor trained for military combat loss. A pause. All of them failed. Darren said nothing. My daughter spoke to me this morning, Vel said. For the first time in 8 months, she spoke. She spoke at length. She told me about her crew, about the border engagement, about the order she gave. His voice remained completely steady. She had not been able to say those things to anyone. Not to me. Not to specialists trained specifically to help her say them. She said them to me this morning after speaking with you. Still, Darren waited. I want to understand what method you used, Vel said. Darren considered the question carefully. There wasn't a method, he said. I sat with her. I didn't ask her to perform for me. I didn't bring a goal into the room that she could feel waiting on the other side of every exchange. I just treated her like someone worth being patient for. Vel looked at him. That is all, he said. I also told her the truth when it was the right time for truth, Darren said. And I didn't pretend the hard things were smaller than they were. In the Valeth formal posture system, standing without any shift in weight for more than 20 seconds signals concentrated evaluation. Vel had been doing it since Darren entered. You did not know who she was, Vel said. No. You were told only that she was a ward in need of communication assistance. Yes. And you knew nothing of the succession right, nothing of what was at stake. Nothing until yesterday. Vel was quiet for a moment. You helped her because she was in front of you, and she needed help. Yes, Darren said. That's the whole reason. Something shifted in Vel's expression. A slight adjustment around the eyes, a fraction of softness in the set of his jaw. On a face holding absolute stillness, it was like watching a stone move. He took 1 step forward. Then he raised his right hand and extended it, arm out, palm turned slightly sideways, the deliberate form of a human handshake. It was studied, practiced. He had prepared for this specific gesture, which meant he had known he was going to do this before Darren walked in. That detail said more than anything else in the room. Darren reached out and shook his hand. Vel's grip was careful, measured not to be crushing, which for a Valeth of his physical scale required obvious conscious effort. I have commanded fleets across 4 sectors, Vel said. I have been in rooms with rulers and generals and people who believed very strongly in their own importance. A pause. I have met very few individuals I respected. He released Darren's hand and stepped back. The meeting was concluded. Darren walked out. He went to the outer observation deck outside. The 3 Valeth warships were moving, slow and enormous, pulling away from the station's perimeter in the particular deliberate way that large vessels began long journeys. He heard footsteps behind him, light ones, familiar by now. Sova stopped a meter away and looked at the same view. You're leaving, he said. Yes. Her voice was different from the observation deck 3 nights ago. Not fragile anymore. Still quiet, but settled. The council sits in 11 days. You'll be ready, he said. She was silent for a moment. Then, in your language, there is a word for light after long darkness. She said it the way someone does when they have been thinking about something for days and have finally decided to say it out loud. I think I understand it now. He looked at her. Her bioluminescent eyes were steady. The warm, layered pattern he had never found a full word for. He thought now that it was not one emotion. It was what several things together looked like when they finally stopped fighting each other. The ships moved. The stars held still. Good luck, he said. She looked at him once more. Then she walked back inside. Darren stayed at the glass until the warships were gone. He thought about a girl in a corner, watching a cup roll across a floor. 4 rings assembled in a way no one had thought to try. One word said quietly in the dark, pointing at something too real to leave unnamed. He thought that sometimes the most important thing a person could do was simply stay. Then he went back to work.